Hi, my name is Kristina Parker. I'm a Christian conservative activist in the state of Maine. I wear many hats and I do lots of things, but today I'm sitting down and having a conversation with a man named Zak and Matt, and we are just talking about what happened last week with Charlie Kirk. This is no particular project of anybody's. We just wanted to have a conversation and bring you along for the ride. Well, we are all here today because we wanted to sit down and have a conversation about what happened last week and about where we are going from here and where everyone else should go from here and what we can do as a state and as a country. So I have Zak. He's from Bowdoin College Conservatives, and we have Matt Griffiths, and he's with the Young Republicans. And my name is Kristina Parker, and I am involved with Turning Point USA here in the state. So the specific story we're talking about is what everyone is talking about these days. I mean, have you guys seen anything besides Charlie Kirk on your Facebook feeds?
Nope, that has been everything.
Yeah.
That has been all of it, yeah.
So Wednesday afternoon last week, Charlie was doing his normal thing that he does on college campuses. He was doing a Prove Me Wrong segment, which is like a speech event type thing with thousands of students from Utah. And he was shot by a rifleman who was up on a roof in the neck, and there wasn't much they could do for him after that. It was a pretty clean assassination. He was murdered in Utah, and about 2 hours after that, we got the announcement that he had passed away. And since then, I don't think Maine has been the same at all. His wife spoke on Friday night. She gave an address, and she said that she's going to keep going strong. Their efforts as Turning Point are going to continue. Obviously, she's devastated at the passing of her husband, but he would wanted everyone to keep going strong, so that's why we're here today. And I would love to get both of your perspectives. I think we really should talk about how we all felt personally. So, Zak, why don't you tell me what you were doing or what your reaction was about this whole thing?
Yeah, I was in class, and then we started to hear of what happened, and it just spread like wildfire across the whole college campus. Immediately, there were some students who were celebrating on Yik Yak and other anonymous social forums, just celebrating. Obviously, it was originally the Pray for Charlie. Those images were being circulated because we didn't know whether he had been slain or not. And with Maine College Republicans, we contacted the vast majority of our chapter heads and said, look, just talk to your group. Make sure we have something going out with our groups so that we talk to everyone who might feel affected by this, who might need some help right now, who might just want some comfort. And then we obviously put out a Pray for Charlie statement as Maine College Republicans for the state. And then obviously just shortly after, we found out that he'd died. And that was, I think it really hit home to a lot of our members just how important it is that we stick together, for one, but also that you speak your mind on a college campus. I mean, that's arguably his entire message. It's a large part of it. And I think for a lot of us, what it started to do, I mean, it's a terrifying event for any Republican on a college campus. They can almost associate with it in some degree. But what it has allowed us to do is sort of show with strength and resolve, like, this is the time to come out of the woodwork and to be proud of your opinions and to be forthright with them.
100%. And so you're on a college campus and you saw everyone's reactions. Yik Yak, which is a anonymous, almost group chat for specific colleges. I mean, I'm sure it's used around the whole United States, but I mean, Matt's a Republican. He's also a conservative. And what was your reaction in your own life to that?
Yeah, so I was traveling back on a plane, actually, and I got a text message. And they said, have you seen or heard what's happened? I said, no. And they said that Charlie had been shot. And I said, wow. And immediately I was just, wow, this is where we've come as a country, is that this is what's happening. And my immediate reaction was it was very heartbreaking, especially for me. I mean, a lot of other young people. I think what's interesting, too, is how young people have connected with Charlie and the relationship they built with Charlie. And I think this is why you see at these vigils, you see young people are so sad, so heartbroken, because why a lot of them may not personally know Charlie. They do know Charlie because their relationship with Charlie and through a lot of the stuff that he's done is through a screen. And they've built that connection with him through the messaging and through the screen, which is how he got to his audience. And I think that's what's been so hard to watch, is a lot of these young people who have connected with someone, they've lost him to an act of senseless murder. But my immediate reaction was absolutely heartbreaking for Erica, who is struggling a lot right now. I'm praying for her a lot. But yeah, that was my immediate reaction, was very sad. And I know everyone shared in that too, and in our organization as well, because I know a lot of people in our organization, just as with yours, had some sort of connection or relationship with Charlie, whether it was through a screen, whether it's through work we've done with Turning Point previously, now with the Young Republicans. But it was very sad. And then what made it even more sad for me is the immediate reaction from some of the leftists who were celebrating this, and it was that made it even harder to see. And my immediate thing too was to contact all of the people in our organization, making sure that they were okay. How are they dealing with this? Is there something that we can do to help them get through this? Because I think that's important that we show, is that, you know, we are strong, we are together in this, and we're going to be able to get through this very, very tough time united. So I think that's kind of where we were at the time. It was very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen so many messages from people saying, I didn't even know the guy, and I feel like I lost a family member. So I heard the news. A friend had texted me, and I was like, well, what do you mean? What happened to Charlie? And he explained, and then obviously that same friend called me to tell me that he had passed away. But I didn't cry right away, but I had this horrible ache in my stomach because, I mean, I was just, you know, at my apartment bumming around, getting work done, and then now my life, nobody's life will ever be the same from that moment. And when things got quiet, that's when I really realized, I mean, Charlie was a fantastic man. He was passionate and bold and courageous, and he always said what he thought. He always spoke the truth. He was very compassionate and kind. A lot of Mainers who are watching this know that he was actually in our state just about a month and a half ago in Old Orchard Beach. The Maine Civic Action group hosted him for their inaugural event. He was the keynote speaker, so he came, and it was very refreshing to see him address Maine issues from his perspective. And I got a chance to talk to him for, I mean, it was less than a minute. We were in the same room, and I got introduced to him, and I told him that his organization, Turning Point USA, which is a conservative nonprofit to get conservative communities and voices on college and high school campuses. That was his whole thing, was to engage the youth, that it had been growing in Maine. And especially since last Wednesday, it's tripled and quadrupled in size even since then. But I told him, I shook his hand, I said what my name was, and he looked at me like I was his daughter or something, or like we had been friends for 10 years. And he said, that is really amazing. That's so awesome. I'm really, really glad to hear that. And he was very kind and compassionate. And I mean, based off of what I saw in that, but also the videos that his wife posts or that his close friends are posting of him, that he was a really great dad, and that it's really tragic. I mean, his children were 3 and 1 years old, and he had a wife. They'd been married, I think, for less than 5 years. So this is so heartbreaking. And right after it happened, I had texted my mom and my stepdad, and I was like, is this like what it was like when JFK died? And obviously 9/11 was much larger, but it's the whole country just heaving a heavy sigh and feeling it all together because of how Charlie impacted us.
And I think the reason he impacted us so well was because he completely democratized information and how it came through, and the conservative arguments came through, and he made it understandable for so many young people all across the country to just engage openly. I mean, he left an open mic out, and so many people came to it. And that's, I think, the reason it's so shocking is because he did, for a lot of young people, make up their feet consistently. But not only that, he would be on their campus, he'd be shaking hands. He met so many young people.
100%. That was his biggest thing, was having open conversation, and he thought that it was just the most important thing in the world. And I agree. I said the other day, the best way to find the best solution for any problem is to get as many perspectives as possible, think critically, also pray about it. And once you get people's perspectives and you don't shut people out, that's how you're going to come up with the best way to do anything. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to have, for example, government, which is going to affect every single American citizen's lives and a lot of people around the world's lives, then you should be able to have an open discussion about anything and put anything on the table. So that's what was different about Charlie. And today we're sitting down to have this conversation, but I mean, I haven't shut up about it since, and I'm not going to shut up about my faith because we can't afford that. Mm-hmm. America used to be a country where you could say whatever you wanted, whatever you thought, and act how you believe is right without consequence. And then, Wednesday afternoon, that changed. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people can be a little bit scared, but since we're all coming out and talking at the same time, I think we have strength in numbers, which is what you were saying, Matt, with unity and how important that is.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me, you've had a couple conversations with people around the unity topic. Can you go into that real quick?
Yeah, so I think unity is very important, especially with young people right now. I think it's important that we come together, even people that we disagree with. I reached out to the Maine Young Democrats back in February, and I said, hey, I want this, obviously we're the Maine Young Republicans, they're the Maine Young Democrats. I want a cordial and communicative relationship, working together. Although we have different policy goals, we have different election goals, we're still trying to get young voters engaged, people registered to vote, get them to the polls. That's the goal. So I really wanted that relationship with them, that we're kind of working parallel, but we're not going to do anything, bad towards them. They won't do anything bad towards us. And so I did offer to do a joint statement with them, calling out political violence as a whole. And they wanted to add a few more things to it. One of them was about gun control. They wanted to add some policy points, and I did. That's not what this is about. This is about calling out political violence, which is completely unacceptable. It doesn't belong in this country. It will never belong in this country. And I even said we can call it out as a whole. You look at what's happened in Minnesota. You look at what's happened in other places. You look at what's happening in general, just acts of violence. It's not acceptable, and we've got to come together and say this is not acceptable. We can't behave this way. And unfortunately, they wanted to add some policy points to it that I don't think would align with the message that we're trying to put out, which is a message of unity. I don't think we should add messaging that divides people. Policy points are what separate us. I feel like we should focus on what brings us together, and that's calling out violence for what it is. So I'm looking and hoping that and praying that we're going to be able to have a conversation with them. I will gladly, invite them to a table, have a conversation, find where we can agree on, find things that we both agree on, and really let people know that it's okay to agree on things every now and again. It's okay to disagree on things, but it's also okay to agree on things every now and then. And so that's my hope and that's my prayer, that we will be able to do that.
I think that's what Charlie would want.
Absolutely.
To sit down and have conversations. So,
Absolutely.
Zak, you are on a college campus, and I would love to really get your perspective on what things are like to be a young conservative, or even just a young Christian, or someone who has more Republican views in that general sphere of things. What is it like being your age on a college campus, and where would you say other people your age in the same or similar conversations and positions should do? What would you say to them?
Yeah, first I'll just pick up on that unity point, which is, it's clearly in times like this the most important. And I think what I do still think is, despite the fact that what we had on Sunday, which you'll probably hear about at some point during this conversation, and we also reached out to Bowdoin Democrats, and I reached out to Bowdoin Democrats as a club leader to suggest a joint statement, which the administration had also put to us as a good idea. because some other colleges had done it across the school. And I even changed the wording of the joint statement so it wasn't sort of particularly explicit about this shooting, and it even explicitly pertained to the shooting of the 2 Minnesota lawmakers, which was just a horrific event. And I was effectively told, oh, well, we'll have to check if our members want that. I'm not sure we really want to be partnering with you guys on a joint statement condemning political violence. And I was sort of taken aback. And a lot of people I'd spoken to who are moderates or who are in their club were taken aback. They were really horrified that their club leadership wouldn't allow for a joint statement on this. And I think that feeds into your point, which is, it's not particularly easy to be a conservative student on a college campus. Mm-hmm. And some people say, oh, you're whining, etc. But it is difficult. Especially, that was the need for Charlie. I mean, he came and he effectively, he realized that it was difficult for so many students to voice conservative opinions on campuses, that it wasn't flourishing, that there wasn't spirited debate and open conversation. And so he came and changed all of that. It's a shame he was never able to come to Bowdoin. And I think, for instance, I can speak with Bowdoin as an example. Our club list, so when I first came to sort of an elite liberal arts school on the East Coast, I knew it would be very liberal. But I wasn't expecting to have no conservative organization there whatsoever. And then when I set it up, we had to have an anonymous club list, and we still have an anonymous member list, because otherwise no one will join, because everyone will be far too terrified to join. That is a really worrying state for the country to be in, and for higher education to be in. A really worrying state. The amount of students that I get who come to me who say they self-censor, who say they're terrified their friends will find out about their political opinions and more. I mean, it's really heartbreaking when I have to talk to some of these people. And I mean, for instance, with Bowdoin faculty, a rough number would probably be 200 registered Dems to 2 registered Republicans.
Wow.
Oh my God.
And if we wonder why the political violence that we see in the country happens, it's because a lot of students come from places in higher education where they don't know how to live and work and be friends with people who disagree with them. Mm-hmm. And why is that? It's because they just don't exist at the colleges, because they haven't admitted them. They refuse to hire conservative professors and administrators. And this leads to this massive swing, which is that a lot of young people will never get their views questioned going to college. And they will think that everyone agrees with them, and the sort of only conservatives that exist sort of come from the plains of Texas and not, and they don't exist in Maine, or they don't exist in my neighborhood or as my friends or my professors. And they do, but the issue is they're not loud enough, they're not outspoken enough. And the other issue is that the colleges are purposely trying to shut them down or make sure there's less of them on campus.
So I think the way to put it simply is, what you're hoping to do and what we're hoping to do is to empower young conservatives, or really just anyone to say what you think and then be open to have a conversation about it. So then, I mean, you always hear politics is not acceptable dinner conversation. And I think it's because it used to be, oh, well, that's kind of icky, we don't want to get into that. And then it became people were so set in their own views that they were going to get offended and violent if you had a conversation. And now it's just is not talked about. But I think if we can go back to, I'm willing to discuss politics so that we can find something to agree on, like Matt said, and have that conversation. And so you've spoken about college students who are kind of conservative leaning or aligning there. And I'd like to ask Matt, what should Republicans in this state be doing to honor Charlie, or in conviction of what they felt last week?
So I attended the vigil in Portland last Friday, I believe it was Friday, and there were a lot of young people out there in Monument Square at 6:30 in the evening on a Friday. I think one thing I think we should address too, which is, well, I mean, we can probably address it after this, but I'd like to address this too, is you see this kind of revival that's happening, especially like faith-wise with young people after this tragic event, that, you see a lot of people coming together on our side. On the other side, even when you go to these vigils, you'll see people walking down the street, shouting, saying things that aren't really nice to say, aside from what they're saying on social media. But then you have people at these vigils that are singing to their Lord Jesus, or, singing praise to God, or, praying for Charlie's family, praying for each other, and keeping each other in prayer, which I think is really important too. But more than that, you see people asking questions. Where do we go from here? How can we further this movement? How can we turn this into action? And after that event, I saw a group of young people. This was 15 minutes after the event. How can I get involved? How can we keep this going? How can I, you're with the Young Republicans. How can we, turn this into action? And again, I think that's by, pushing for common sense legislation that the majority of Americans agree with, and not to make this too political. That's with, men and women's sports, the common sense legislation. And most Americans agree that men don't belong in women's sports. I think it's a lot of things like that where, turning that into action, talking to voters, getting people registered, letting people know that it's okay to think this way. Like Zak had talked about, it's okay to think this way. It's okay to believe this way. So I think turning it into action is going to be talking to voters, knocking on doors, making phone calls, having conversations. I think that's the big thing, is having conversations, having respectful conversations with people who may not agree with us, to explain to them, this is why this is so important. This is what's at stake in these elections. When you see what's happening here in Maine, you have an administrative government that has taken over a vast majority of the state. And you look at even, I believe when Charlie was here, he was speaking, he was talking about the number of young people that are leaving the state. They're leaving the state because it's not good for them to be here. They're not able to thrive like they are seeing, or like they're able to thrive in other places. We have to bring that back. We have to make Maine a state where young people can thrive, where they can come in and they can stay, and they can build a family, and they can be successful. And I think that's what we're trying to push for, and I think that's really the action we're going to have to take.
Yeah, and that was Charlie's whole speech a couple weeks ago, was the young Maine people are leaving, and we would like for them to stay.
Absolutely.
Simply put. And practically, if you would like to get involved with the Republican Party, they have a pretty great website. They just revamped it, and they have contact information for any of the county chairs for their committees. So that would be a really great resource if someone wanted to get involved.
Absolutely. As
someone who wouldn't be specifically a young Republican. And something that I would really like to touch on and take just a moment to talk about is how the Christian faith is impacting this whole thing. Because I think it's even more important than the conservatism that Charlie had, or the political part of things. Is like, yeah, he was involved in politics, but he wasn't a politician. He didn't hold any office. He was a commentator, but really he spoke at a lot of churches. He was a preacher, and he was fervently seeking after God every day, and every other conversation he would have would be saying, accept Christ as your Lord and Savior, and have him be the center of your life. So if you are a Christian in the state of Maine, dig deep, really pursue that. That's going to be, if you're a Christian anywhere, that's going to be the central piece of your life, and that's how we can carry on Charlie's legacy best. And I think that's what he would have wanted the most. But if you're not, then you gotta be, because someday you are going to die, and you're either going to be in hell or you're going to be in heaven, and God's going to say, either he knew you or he didn't. So I think you have to think about that in the grand scheme of things, for the long haul. And if that's not enough to convince you, then when you have a relationship with Jesus, he is your best friend, and he can walk alongside you through every trial. I think that's why Erica Kirk is making it through all of this, because she has Jesus with her, and she has God as her Savior. And Absolutely. In her life, there's no other way to recover from this than besides with the healing power Absolutely. Of Christ. So have a conversation with someone. If you know a Christian in your life, talk to them. You could always reach out to any of us after this. Go to your local church on Sunday. They would be really happy to have you, and really at least take some time to think about it, and where faith in God would play a role in your life.
Absolutely.
And at least consider it. If you haven't considered it in a while, take a second to consider it, I think is the biggest thing. And like I said, any church would be really happy to have you. So, get up a little earlier on a Sunday morning, head to church.
Yeah, on this Sunday, I was at church, and Father Andrew, what he said was, he reminded us that a few months before Charlie's death, he had an interview, and he said, what would I like to be remembered for? And it was the courage in my faith. And I think that's really something we can take from this. And I do think it's also important to stress that as Christians, we're also called to a higher purpose and a higher act and a higher way of living our lives. And so we're all angry. We are. Of course we are, about this awful event. But we're asked to be Christians. And so we're asked to realize that our neighbor isn't just the person that agrees with us, but it's also the person that might vehemently disagree with us. And as hard as it is, it's also the person, say, on my college campus who celebrated his death. And I've got to, and I think it's important for everyone who is a Christian watching this to remind ourselves that we have to hold ourselves to a standard that Jesus wants us to hold ourselves to.
Yeah, I mean, so as a closing message, I've always been telling people this is not very political. This is about our community. So pray and, hug your kids and go touch grass and get involved with your local community. But I think we'll use this as our final thought, because I think we've really explored this. And going forward, we're saying, I don't care where you get involved. Just do something, really. And I think you both agree.
Absolutely.
I don't care what you do. Just do something.
And if you're on a college campus too in Maine, reach out to any of the college campus Republicans. And if you feel hurt, or if you feel like you're going through a difficult time watching this, reach out. There's a community there for you.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't got one, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else, and we'll set a community up there. We want to expand. This is the call to do this.
Exactly. And so final thoughts. Charlie would pray for the person who shot him. Jesus would hug that person and say, I hope that you repent of your sins and you follow me. And that's I can't even talk right. That's a hard pill to swallow, to think about. I mean, you just see the picture of him in your head and thinking about praying for that person. But yes, you should pray for them, but that's also going to help you have love in your heart and know, that person was created by God and he is loved by God despite the horrible thing that he did. So for all the people who are celebrating that Charlie is dead, I think that they have a lot of hurt in their hearts and they need compassion and love. As tough of a pill as it is to swallow, then, I mean, I sound like some lefty activist, but I'm like, love everybody, but it's true. Love everyone and show them the compassion and love that Jesus would have for them. And with that, thank you all. Thank you both for sitting down and having this conversation with me. Yeah,
and I think if I can add on that just one thing, I think something too is when I was watching Charlie, I've watched a lot of his stuff, and one of the things he said one time was, there's nothing in the Bible, whether you believe in it or you don't, that when you look at it and you act on it, it will not make your life better. How reading it, there's nothing in the Bible that you can't read that won't make you emotionally feel better about something, that won't give you hope. And I think right now, that's what a lot of these young people are wanting is hope, and especially young conservatives, especially when you see all of the noise and a lot of these nasty comments. I think, like you said, the nasty comments are probably what's hurting young conservatives too, is because they're seeing a lot of this stuff coming at them, and it's like, why do people think this way? Why do people think that of us? I've had people call me and say, why do they hate us so much, man? Why do they not like us? And, there really is, that's not a question I can answer, because I don't know. I don't know what would make somebody do that. I think they're lost. I think they're lost in their faith. I think us having faith and us staying strong in our faith is what's going to overpower a lot of this, and showing them that, there is love to be had in this. And I think showing that and showing that publicly as well will show them. So I agree. Yeah, so I really love what you said right when you started, which is there is hope. Turning Point is growing. The Republican Party is growing. Churches, my church was overflowing. Churches are growing. So there is hope, and there is a way forward after this. Absolutely. So, thanks, guys. Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.